All right, I think there I am. Um, all right, so let me pull this up, start sharing my screen with you all. Oops. Okay, so yeah, welcome everyone to Solidarity and Solutions, moving OT education and practice forward. My name is Tony. I'm a co-founder and chair of Diverse OT National. And this today is being brought to you in collaboration with the Black Allied Health Therapists group. So I would like to kick it over to Ashley so you can introduce yourself.
Thank you, Tony. My name is Ashley Ballou. I'm an occupational therapist by trade and the founder of Black Allied Health Therapists. The group was designed or is designed for PT, OT, and SLP practitioners and students to allow for collaboration, connection, and the goal is to achieve increased diversification in their respective disciplines. And so I'm just so thankful that for this collaboration and for this opportunity for us to support you all and for us to just communicate as well as gain solutions for the pressing matters in social injustices. So thank you so much for your time, Tony.
Of course. And it's always like really, really nice to be able to collaborate with other people, other groups, and just see that there are other people in the field trying to make change. So I'm really thankful to be working with you as well. So that's really exciting. And I think you also have someone else from your team here today.
Yes, ma'am. So we have Dr. Kendrlyn Lott. She is an occupational therapist as well, and she is the OT moderator for Black Allied Health Therapists. If you're on, Kendrlyn.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. It's my pleasure to join. I'm looking forward to great conversations here and supporting both groups as we move forward to discuss what we have before us.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And like I said before, I'm Tony. This is who I am because I always think it's important to know a little bit about who we're speaking to. The main highlights from here is that my main background is in functional cognition and mental health and community-based mental health. I'm here based in Chicago, Illinois. Like I said, co-founder and chair of Diverse OT National. And I just graduated from Columbia University with my doctorate. So that was really exciting. That was thank you. It was like, you know what I'm saying? I was like, oh, we made it, Mama, we made it. So thank you very much. And yes, and I'm currently also a clinical assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee.
It's up here though.
Okay, and then just a little bit more about Diverse OT. So there's a whole team behind this operation. I think someone's mic might be unmuted. I'm not sure who it is. But yeah, so this is the rest of the Diverse OT executive board. And so what we do, we have 5 chapters.
Can I see you if you're home or no?
We also provide consultation services, develop presentations and educational resources, just like presentations that you're seeing today. we also like to support the emotional, academic, and material needs of our students, and things that we have in the works that you'll see coming really, really soon that we're excited about is our mentorship program and also our community action committee. So we can really sustain the work that we're doing, but also create a community of people who would also like to participate in this work. Okay. So again, our organization was created by 2 licensed OTs, and Diverse OT is dedicated to enhancing the field of occupational therapy by providing opportunities to integrate equity and cultural responsiveness into the occupational therapy student experience. And we also want to develop and support the recruitment of underrepresented students into occupational therapy programs through community outreach and mentoring. And essentially, our mission is to advance a cultural climate within the occupational therapy profession. We strive to foster a strong community of critically reflexive occupational therapists and students equipped with the knowledge and skills to provide culturally relevant care to individuals, populations, and the communities that serve. As our client populations continue to become increasingly diverse, culturally responsive practitioners are essential. Occupational therapists must practice with cultural humility and continuously analyze how sociocultural assumptions, social positions, and biases intersect with client choices and freedoms. So to accomplish this mission, Diverse OT strives to recruit and retain underrepresented students into OT programs, increase occupational therapists and students' knowledge of culturally responsive concepts and how to navigate crucial conversations with colleagues or classmates, emphasize the importance of reflection of the larger picture to promote awareness of how we operate within a system, and create affirming work or learning environments in which all people are free to express themselves and are provided equal access and fair treatment. We envision a field of future occupational therapists who practice with cultural responsiveness and integrate principles of equity and inclusion in all they do. And we value advocacy, empowerment, culturally relevant care, occupational justice, and community partnerships. So that's what Diverse OT is all about. If you are a student and are interested in having a Diverse OT chapter at your school, you can go to diverse-ot.com and click on our start a chapter, and we'd be happy to meet with you because we love working with students. It's what makes like all of this worth it. Okay, so on for today. So this is our agenda. We just did introductions. We'll breeze through some learning objectives, community agreements, boundaries, and expectations. Then we'll do a presentation where all the Black OTs. After that, we'll open it up to all of you to have a community conversation. And then we'll end with solidarity and solutions. So we're going to apply the participatory occupational justice framework to ways that we can be in solidarity with one another and create solutions within OT programs and OT practice itself. And then as part of solidarity and solutions, because I didn't have time to add a extra little part, is that we'll also talk about tactics to delay justice, right? So a specific conversation about ways that progress is hindered. And then for those of you who would like to stay after this talk is officially over, please stay back, and I'd love to chat. We'd all love to chat and network and get to know one another more. So that is what today will look like. So our learning objectives for today: after today's sessions, participants should be able to explain how OT education and practice is informed by US history, should be able to apply the POJF to current issues within OT education and practice, and then be able to identify 2 to 3 ways to move OT education and practice forward. Our community agreements here are first to speak from the I perspective. So avoid speaking for others by using we, us, or them. To listen actively, listen to understand and not respond. Sometimes we are tempted to start formulating our response. Instead, let's give 100% of our focus to whomever is speaking. The next is step up, step back. If you usually speak often or find yourself talking more than others, challenge yourself to lean into listening and opening space for others. If you usually don't talk as much in groups and do a lot of thinking and processing in your own head, know that the group would love to hear from you and challenge you to bring your voice forward in this conversation. Also, just for the purposes of today, you can either raise your hand to make a comment, or please feel free to utilize the chat box at any time. So if there's any question or thought that pops up for you, you can always drop it in the chat. Our next agreement is to respect silence. So don't force yourself to fill silence. Silence can be an indication of thought and process. To share, even if you don't have the right words. So to suspend judgment and allow others to be unpolished in their speaking. If you're unsure of their meaning, then ask for clarification. To uphold confidentiality, treat the honesty of others as a gift. Assume that personal identities, experiences, and perspectives shared in this space are confidential unless you are given permission to use them. And want to put an asterisk next to this one that, you know, if something extremely harmful is said in this space or something dangerous or threatening, then of course you have the right to talk about your experiences with that, but we're going to make sure that doesn't happen in this space, or try not to. And then the last is to lean into discomfort. So learning happens on the edge of our comfort zones. Push yourself to be open to new ideas and experiences, even if they initially seem uncomfortable to you. So if people are okay with these community agreements, if we all agree to them, please, I would love to see a thumbs up, either in the camera, or you can drop an emoji, or you can do the thumbs up reaction. Just need to see some thumbs up, please. All right, cool. Thumbs up all around, thumbs up all around. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And then if you have an agreement that you would like to add, you can put it in the chat. And then if you think these community agreements are absolutely ridiculous, well, you're free to leave the call. Okay. So just some more about our learning environment behavior expectations. This is an anti-racist learning space. So there's a zero tolerance policy for racism, sexism, classism, ableism, transphobia, homophobia, xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and hate speech or actions that attempt to silence, threaten, or degrade others. In this space, we have agreed to uphold the community agreements and engage in mutual respect with one another, and then also to respect different styles of expression. So respect different styles for presenting, respect different lived experiences and viewpoints, and also respecting different ways of knowing and being. So if this learning environment behavior and expectations and boundaries are good for you, please, again, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. If you have something that you would like to add or a question, put it in the chat. And again, if you are like, no, actually, I refuse to do this, then again, you are allowed to leave at any time. We won't hold you hostage, I promise. All right, cool. Thank you so much, everyone. So we will first get into this bit here. Where all the Black OTs. But before we fully dive in there, I'm gonna throw something into the chat function. So, if we, as I go along in today's presentation, I'm going to mention different resources or different solutions, suggestions, or things that we can do. If you follow the link in the Google Drive that I just put in, you will be able to access everything that I am talking about. So for example, I just recently, hold on, let me do a new share. Okay. So for example, here within this Solidarity and Solutions folder, I have just actually really recently done a podcast episode about where all the Black OTs, so I might go a little bit faster through today's presentation, but you all can listen to the full thing there. You also have access to today's presentation here. And then there are going to be different sections where we suggest different actions. And for all of those things, there will be resources within each folder. So make sure to click through all these folders, but if I make reference to something, I promise there's a folder in here. Within the Seek Out Learning Opportunities, within those, there are even bigger folders about occupational justice resources, and then social determinants of health, all of that. So it's full of things to help you take action or to get more information and all of that. So throughout this presentation, if I don't go too in depth about something, it's probably there in the presentation. Okay, so drop a thumbs up in the chat if that just made sense. My students are probably triggered right now by me saying this. Like thumbs up in the chat if you understood what's in the thing. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I will periodically be throughout this presentation stopping to ask you all questions. And again, you are free to raise your hand to answer the question, or you can put your response in the chat. We will be monitoring that throughout. So here today, we're going to start off where are all the Black OTs? A brief history of white supremacy in the United States. So the reason that I like to start here is because when we talk about inclusion, we need to have kind of a historical understanding of where that word comes from, or why we are talking about inclusion and diversity and equity and justice. Because sometimes I think we talk about JEDI and DEI and all of this, but without having an understanding of how we even got to the point of needing these different types of committees or organizations or movements or interventions, we have to see where it all came from, so then we can actually effectively address the issue. So here we are. So how do we move OT education and practice forward? And that's by examining US history with a critical lens and acknowledging the intersection of OT history in order to understand how the past has impacted our future so that we can create a better future. And actually, sorry, y'all, 1 second. Okay. Okay, awesome. So where are all the Black OTs? So I always like to start in 1865, and that is because that is when slavery was first abolished in the United States. In the 1870s, that's where you see Jim Crow laws come about. So Jim Crow laws were essentially, it was legalized segregation. So, you know, when you see the pictures of like white people at white only water fountains versus Black people at colored water fountains, like that's Jim Crow. In 1896, that's when Plessy versus Ferguson, that ruled that separate but equal was the law of the land. So it was under this of 1896 of separate but equal was the law of the land. So when we come to 1915, which we typically think of as the start, or is kind of the starting area of OT, because that's when we have the first OT training program created by Eleanor Clark Slagle, and you have the Hull House created in Chicago. So in 1915, when OT is really kind of starting to get going and starting to get formalized as a profession, Plessy versus Ferguson, aka separate but equal, was the law of the land. Jim Crow was the law of the land. So in 1917, the National Society for the Promotion of Occupational Therapy, aka NSPOT, was founded. Present day is known as AOTA. So from there in 1920, you see that there's the Mississippi School of OT is the first school to offer courses in OT for African Americans. It was a private school that later relocated to Louisiana by its director, and the course are discontinued in 1939. The state segregation laws required a separate department to educate African-American students, which caused overcrowding in the program. So that is when, so that is the first school that accepts Black OTs, but then as we see, it couldn't be sustained due to segregation. So then we move over to 1921, and that is when the NSPOT Constitution is revised, and that's when we've got AOTA as its official name. And then in 1944, Black students are now allowed to attend OT school. There are only 8 OT programs that allow Black students to attend. And if the school was not an HBCU, Black students were still segregated into different training spaces. And this is just crucially important because, and sorry, let me just copy something here. This is really crucially important because you can see here that for the first 33 years of the profession, right, it's just outright exclusion. So where are all the Black OTs being excluded by the law, not allowed legally to be in the same training programs as white OTs, and there are no training programs that exist specifically for Black OTs at this point. So that is where the Black OTs are at this point. And so then in 1944, like I said, we've got Black students now attending OT school. And something that is important here is that, yes, Black people were now allowed to go to OT school, but they had to be lighter skinned or white passing. And they also had to be middle class. So there were even, more stipulations of Black people who were allowed to attend. Well, you have to be white looking, you have to be rich. And so that is where the Black OTs were. So in 1946, Ruth Denard and Naomi Wright are the first African-American women to graduate and be registered as occupational therapists. So again, OT, the kind of beginnings of it is getting started in 1915, officially recognized as 1917 as our official start. And it's not until 1946 that we have the first 2 licensed and registered Black OTs, or sorry, just registered, licenses didn't come till later. So that is just 30 years, right, of just pure exclusion right there. So it took 30 years for Black people to first even be able to enter into the profession since it was founded. In 1952, AOTA then establishes the Eleanor Clark Slagle Lectureship, which, is one of the highest honors within our profession, and that's going to be important for later on. And then 1953, AOTA updated the enrollment data collection form to include the question, what is the number of males and Negroes enrolled? And then the response was 67 Negro students were enrolled nationwide. And so that is where we are in 1953 and then in the next year after this question was first proposed, we've got the civil rights movement begins. So this is Black Americans now agitating to have their rights. And this is things like housing rights, voting rights, still attempting to desegregate spaces, all of those things. In 1954, we have Brown versus Board of Education, which effectively makes integration the law of the land and then strikes down Plessy versus Ferguson. So it is, again, so it's about 1954 here. The profession officially starts in 1917. So then it's 37 years from the start of the profession until the civil rights movement even becomes a question. So for the first 37 years of the profession, Black people did not have their full rights in this country. So again, where are all the Black OTs being systemically excluded by society and by the law? In 10 years later, in 1964, the Civil Rights Act passed. So this is reversing those Jim Crow laws in 1964. And then in 1965, Voting Rights Acts have passed. So here, because I think I misspoke here at 1954, it's really at 1964 when we really count how long Black people have had their full rights in the country. So it's about 57 years. And honestly, that there are people who are probably on this call today who were alive during some of these times. So that's really important to recognize that this isn't really that long ago. And also, I want to note, it wasn't until the 1960s that disabled people were allowed to be considered for OT programs. And that's just important to point out that during the 1950s and 60s, there were several civil rights movements that were happening, right? So civil rights, gay rights, women's rights, and disabled rights. And so it was not until 1960s through that disability rights movement that as a part of that, we're finally agitating to get disabled people to be allowed to go into OT school. And again, in the 1960s, the rule there was that it was on a case-by-case basis. So depending on, it had to be really specific as to, what type of disability, people with disabilities were allowed into programs. So then we move towards 1969. So that's always like a big talking point when we talk about the history of AOTA and things like that. And it's that Dr. Layla Lawrence is the first and only Black person to give the Eleanor Clark Slagle Lecture. And technically what is left out of the story is that she delivered the speech to a segregated audience, right? So in 1969, the OT profession was practicing segregation. Mind you, this is also 5 years after the fact that segregation was technically illegal in the United States. So that is something that is like, whoa, that's very, very important. It's also important to note because, like I said, she's been the first and only Black person to give a Slagle lecture. So that was about 54 years ago. So you also have to say, you're saying in, first of all, the entirety of the profession, so over 100 years, there's only been one Black person who's been qualified or brilliant at or accomplished enough to be worthy of the highest honor in OT, right? So we see that that's just, there are some questions there. In the 1970s, you have the war on drugs here in America in the age of mass incarceration. I really highly suggest you all read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander if you haven't read it before, but really talks about the devastation that both the war on drugs and the age of mass incarceration had specifically on Black communities. Shout out to Ronald Reagan. He was really, really attacking Black communities left and right. During this time in the late 1960s, early 1970s, there was a lot of the Black Power movement really started to gain momentum, really wanting to teach Black people like, hey, like, we're proud of who we are, and also we have to resist all of like the systemic destruction of our communities and our families and our homes and things like that. So kind of parallel to the Black Power movement and Black Pride within the United States, that's when the Black Occupational Therapy Caucus around that time was founded. And they were founded to provide support to Black OTs and students. And as part of the larger Black Power movement, the group was also formed in response to the overwhelmingly white and middle-class demographic of the profession. So again, I think this is a really important point because one, we see how what's happening within OT directly reflects what is happening in the larger world around us and the political context around us. And also, I would say this is the official record of someone saying, hey, like we have a race problem within our profession. We need to be able to support our Black OTs. We need to recruit more Black OTs and retain Black OT students. So that's 48 years ago. So for the last 48 years, we've allegedly, as a profession, been trying to address the race, the lack of diversity within the profession, but also a little bit concerning that it's been 48 years. And what the Black OT caucus was talking about in 1975 is actually 100% still relevant today in 2023. So that's just a little bit of food for thought. So from there, we jump 10 years to 1985, and there we see 8% of OTs were from an ethnic or minority group. So not just Black, but Black, Asian American, Hispanic, et cetera. So 8% of OTs were of color, and that means 92% of OTs are white at this time. So in 1986, AOTA members introduced and passed resolution 62086, which called for a 2-year study of minority recruitment and retention. So 1986 is where we officially get AOTA on the book saying, oh, maybe we should look at the lack of our diversity. So that's been officially 37 years from 1986 until present day as to how long AOTA has been, every time they put out a statement of like, we're listening, we're learning, we're trying to get better. And we're just know that it's been 37 years of some of these same behaviors of listening and learning and trying to create change. And again, this is important to note because one, we have our starting point of where AOTA decides that, hey, this is actually really important for us to discover or to talk more about is our lack of diversity, which, mind you, took 69 years from the start of the profession until this time for there to be some type of concern. And then, like I said, it's been 37 years since, and these same type of resolutions and programs and, oh, what's going on has still been asked. And so I think that's also really, really important, this timeline, because often Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, people from underrepresented backgrounds are told, change takes time, progress takes time, this all takes time. And you have to understand from a historical view, it's been 3.5 decades, right? So then the question is, how much time do we need to understand that there is an issue? So in 1988, the Minority Affairs Program starts. AOTA creates a Minority Affairs Program. In 1991, it's important to know within society that there were a lot of riots happening, especially in Los Angeles, in response to police officers brutality and beating of Rodney King. In 1991, we also see Barbara Townsend become AOTA vice president. So she's the first Black woman to hold an AOTA leadership role, like a high up leadership role. So again, if we're going from 1917, and that's me being generous, I should really be going from 1915 to 1991. That is 74 years to see one Black person in a prominent role within AOTA. 7 years later, we see that the Multicultural Affairs Program, which was formerly known as the Minority Affairs Program, was dissolved due to budget downsizing and structural changes. So 1998, so the MAP program lasted 10 years, and when it was time to cut things, that is what AOTA found to be worth cutting. So again, where are all the Black OTs? Well, funding for programs that would help Black OTs and OTs of color are being cut. And also where are the Black OTs really responding to some of this societal violence and things like that. So then we go into the 2010s. So in 2010, it's important to know that 5 OTs are Black. So hold on to that percentage. And this time we also see in 2014 that COTED comes along, and then 2 years later, Diverse OT, that's us. We are founded to develop and support the recruitment and retention of underrepresented students through community outreach and mentoring. And again, speaking for Diverse OT, this is a direct response to what is happening in the world around us. In 2016 was very dicey with the presidential election, and really seeing the Black Lives Matter movement begin in response to the murder of Mike Brown by police officer Jerry Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri. So Black OTs needing more support, and again, students of color and students from other underrepresented backgrounds, in addition to practitioners, right? Because the political environment was very anti-Black, anti-immigrant, anti-poor, anti-everything that wasn't white and heterosexual. So that's where you see some of these diversity coalitions and groups coming about And of course, diverse OT is not the only group in existence. I'm biased, and so that's why it is on this timeline. So yeah, so then in 2019, we see that AOTA has to re-release their Vision 2025 to add a fifth pillar of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the Vision 2025 was actually first released in 2017, and then it took some external pressure, and especially after what was after 2016 and moving forward, where more OT practitioners and students are socially conscious and saying, yo, like, where's our statement about diversity, equity, and inclusion? So again, where all the Black OTs, not prioritized, not really thought about, just really tacked on. And then we move to 2020. So that's 10 years after the first time I give you our statistics that 5% of OTs are Black. And that's still the case for now in 2023. So we can see in a decade that our numbers are staying the same. So obviously the attempts to make change or diversify, especially for Black OTs, is not really there. In 2021, we see Christine Priola. She's a Cleveland School District OT. She had to resign after she was part of the June 6th storming and attack. January 6th. And she was later arrested and charged with obstruction of an official proceeding and aiding and abetting. And that was just also really a crucial time, because we all know what happened January 6th. And it was, if we were in any other country, it would have been called a coup. And this was just a really time that not only I don't know if anyone was following social media at that time, but AOTA really resistant and reluctant to come out and say, hey, what's happening at the Capitol is really wrong. And the fact that there was an OT there participating is bad, you know? And so again, where are all the Black OTs? And again, not just Black OTs, but OTs of color, OTs from underrepresented backgrounds. Well, we're watching our national organization essentially stay silent when there, was a white supremacist within the ranks. And then in 2021, we see Arame's elected as the vice president of AOTA. So she's the second Black and first Black and Iranian person elected to this position. But I have been told that perhaps I have missed someone in the AOTA leadership. So she might be the third Black person. So apologies for that. And then you see in 2022 that lynching becomes a federal hate crime. So why does all of this matter? So why do you think we need to know the history? That's a question for you all. Now that I've given us a brief history, please listen to the podcast for an expanded version, but I would like to hear from you all. Why do you think I made a point to go through the history?
Feel free to unmute yourself. And,
Hi, this is Monica Ayala. I would just want to say that I think it's important to review all of that just to show just how little has been done in this amount of time. And it's pretty shocking.
Yeah, Monica, I absolutely agree. It is to give a historical overview, especially because I think often, like I said before, underrepresented people, oppressed groups are often told, why are you guys always complaining, or your time will come? And it's like, well, when is that time? So thank you. Let's see, we all have, let's see.
The chat definitely.
Yeah, the chat is popping, so thank you. So Rachel said, it's important for context to see the limited progress made in this profession. Thank you, and I agree. Dana said, if we don't know the history, we'll continue to repeat mistakes of the past. Oh my gosh, Dana, it's like you're in my brain. Yes, exactly. Susan says to show how little progress has been made. And Brianna says, so we all are on the same page, understanding moving forward. Agree. Thank you. And Gina says it provides for context for why we don't have much diversity in the profession now. Exactly, context. And Katie says it's important to understand how our profession has evolved to also have context of the work that still needs to be done. Thank you so much. Ricky, to know that this has been a long journey towards access, equity, inclusion. It is. I also do want to give a shout out to all of our foremothers and fathers and people, whether that's Black OTs or Hispanic OTs or Asian OTs or disabled OTs or LGBTQ plus OTs. There has been people all throughout the history of our profession in the sidelines, in the shadows, really fighting for where we are now. So I'm always thankful for those who came before us, but also want to recognize that we're still fighting the same fight that they were. So yes, Ricky, a long journey towards access, equity, and inclusion. Susan says to show how much there has been resistance to change. Exactly. And Melanie said, this is not what is typically taught in OTA education. Yeah, because it's really important that we know our history and the context, because it makes everything make more sense. So I think that with this context should be taught a little bit more in schools. Bridget says, as a student, it's nice to hear the history of the profession alongside the history of the country to really put things into perspective. Yes. And Nzinga, I hope I said your name correctly. Context, it's all relevant, and we can't make change if we don't know where we came from or what has or hasn't been done. Perfect. Shelby, to provide us with a framework of what OT profession is founded upon and the lack of progress. Yes. Stephanie says it gives something for educators to understand. Wait, how did I lose your comment, Stephanie? Sorry. It gives something for educators to understand when my department sits there and wonders why we have such low diversity in our program. Thank you, Stephanie, for being really brave to say the big thing out loud. It gives us context, not just for ourselves, but for when programs and hospitals and companies are saying, what's going on? And it's like, well, we have to really acknowledge what the history of the world is. And even present day, not just even history, but present day, this world is increasingly unsafe for Black people and queer people and Latino people and so we have to be honest about what's going on. So thank you, Stephanie. I really appreciate that. Lamar says it provides perspective on the experience of people living in the US and how you can't separate it from OT profession history. We are all affected by oppression. Oh, wow. Lamar, 10 points to you. Yes, we are all impacted by oppression. And it is easy to not want to look at the fact of what's going on around us, right? It's easy to bury your head in the sand. But when we do that, that really denies the truth. And if we deny the truth, there's not much we can do from there. So thank you so much, Lamar. You said, additionally, accurate history is being suppressed and we need to tell the full story. Exactly. And I think a lot of times, to go off of that one more time, Lamar, is sometimes when people are scared of the full history, because right, there are going to be groups that don't come out looking good, or the OT profession doesn't look great at certain points. And it's that fear of, it's the fear of change, the fear of acknowledging wrongdoing. It's like sometimes people feel embarrassed that they had engaged in racist practices or classist practices or homophobic practices. And a lot of denial, and also just clinging on to power. And the way to cling on to power is to deny truth and history. So it is so important that we tell our full history and our accurate history, and that we can stand there and just stand there guilt and shame free while acknowledging the historical truths of oppressed people in this country, saying, yes, like this did happen to your ancestors or to you or to this group of people. This did impact what you're able to do in this profession. It was wrong what you are facing or what you go through. I am here to be an advocate and stand with you to go up against these forces, right? That's so easy for us to do. We don't have to be ashamed of history. We have to acknowledge history bravely and say, okay, how are we going to do things differently this time? And then Ruby, last comment here, says, we owe it to those before us to acknowledge their efforts amid the lack of systemic change over the many, many years. Oh my gosh, if I could love that 10 gazillion times, I would, because I agree so much. And something that I would like to also point out is that when you look back, and specifically on those slides where I went through the civil rights movements of the 1950s and 60s, is that just about every single person in our profession, and this includes white women, got their rights that they have through protesting, civil disobedience, and civil rights movements, right? If you're a woman, you had civil rights to get your full rights that you have right now. If you know what I'm saying? So that, again, that is most of our profession. Most of our profession are women. Our profession has disabled people in it. Our profession has gay people in it. Our profession has Black people in it. Our profession has Latino people in it. And all of these groups, all of us got all of our rights through agitation and fighting civil disobedience, all of that. So it's important that we all acknowledge what it took to get here, because I think sometimes we, again, have this revisionist history of, well, we just one day woke up and everything was hunky-dory. And it's like, no, people have to stand up and fight for something and say, yo, what's going on? Like, this is wrong, or I deserve my rights, or I'm going to stand in solidarity with this other group of people, and we're going to work together for our rights or for the collective good. So it is really important to acknowledge them, and it's really important, especially for underrepresented people, to really acknowledge the bravery of those who came before us and know that we're just as brave, you know? So at least that's what keeps me going. And then last here, Mariah says, it highlights how the system as it was created, it is doing its job, and dire need to break the current system down and build a new one. It truly makes clear that what is happening is a system of oppression, not just one of those one-off instances. Exactly. Oh, Mariah, thank you for all capsing system, because exactly, like literally exactly, this is about a system. It shows us that if we are in 2023 still having issues that were raised by the Black OT caucus in 1975, and we're still having the same issues of no, you know, lack of diversity in the program, which AOTA first, you know, decided to even look into in 1959, and it's now 2023. Yeah, this is a system. This is not a one-off. It's not a mistake. It is a system, and this is how systems work. Yes, Rakia.
Good evening, Dr. Tony, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking my question. This is wonderful information to know. I just want to put in one small correction. The National Black OT Caucus was established in 1974.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that information.
You're welcome. Keep up the great work.
Oh, thank you so much. And I will update the presentation. So I love that, 1974. All right, awesome. So we have here, just going forward, I have a quote by Maya Angelou here, that I have such great respect for the past. If you don't know where you've come from, you don't know where you're going. So that exactly why we need to know our history. We need to know context. We need to know how to make a different path forward and to forge forward. So it's important also because we need to know history, because major systems in the United States were not created with non-white people in mind, right? So for example, the Three-Fifths Compromise, where, you know, at one point in US history, Black people were only considered 3/5 of a person. So systems must be challenged at their core and replaced with a group of people that is truly representative of our population to create truly inclusive spaces. So if we're going to rebuild the system, we have to include everyone at the creation of the system. And so currently, because our system within AOTA, within OT in general, didn't have everyone thought of in the beginning, right? The profession was created with wealthy white women in mind. That is who this entire system was designed for. So if we're going to try to change what we're doing, then we will have to really challenge the system at its core, and we'll have to create a new system with everyone in mind. So that is where we are. It's also important to know our history. Oops, sorry, let me move this. It's also important to know our history because we have to understand where the entire concept of diversity and inclusion came from. Inclusion is about incorporating all of those who were not considered during the foundation of a system. So to be specific to OT, the reason why we have diversity, equity, inclusion, or JEDI, all of those acronyms, every last acronym that you have heard, this all comes from the fact that the system was not created to include non-white populations and were not created to include queer populations or disabled populations. This is why we have to talk about DEI and JEDI. We didn't just magically get here. There was a systemic pattern of exclusion throughout history and throughout the profession. And so that is why we now have to talk about inclusion. And if we don't know our history, we won't understand how we got to the point of needing culturally inclusive learning environments. And then if we don't understand how we got here, then we won't be able to make a targeted intervention and a truly sustainable learning environments, practice environments, and truly inclusive OT association. And the thing about it is, and this is going to be the hard news for today, but I promise it gets better, is that we're not going to be able to like ACOTE standard our way out of this. We're not going to be able to checklist and do surveys our way out of this. Like, we've got some hard work ahead of us. It also shows that our history, not just the history of OT, but how we teach our class materials, no matter what the material is. I don't care if you're teaching phys rehab or neuro or theory or anatomy, are all the things that we teach and that we do, it has to be taught in context, right? Otherwise, we forget why changes were made and they become bureaucratic check marks. So if we don't acknowledge context, then it just turns into, okay, well, how many Black students did we get? Did we meet the mark for Hispanic students? Did we meet the mark for disabled students? And it's like, whoa. How did we get to the point that we are specifically seeking out these students to join our programs? And if we acknowledge those historical truths, then that's how we're going to be able to create and open up, again, sustainable practice areas and sustainable and safe educational areas. It's also just important to be able to talk not only about our history, but also our present, and acknowledge the real world that's happening around us, because what's happening in the world around us is also going to be reflected in our university and learning environments. And right now, what's happening in the world around us is an ongoing pandemic, increased attacks against increased homophobic and transphobic attacks, increased violence against immigrants in this country, increased violence against Black people in this country, increased and ongoing violence against Muslim people in this country, and it's only intensifying, right? We all see what's happening in states like Florida, and so we have to acknowledge the real history of how we even got here in US society, and have to acknowledge how this is going to come and impact what we're doing and learning and teaching in our schools for our program. And it's also important to know our history so we're able to counteract systems of oppression, right? Such as racism, sexism, ableism, classism, homophobia, and white supremacy, because these are all the systems that have systemically excluded our underrepresented students across decades, systemically harmed our OT practitioners from underrepresented backgrounds and from groups that are oppressed. And underrepresented students and practitioners are going to continue to be systemically excluded from society. They are being excluded from society present day, right? So it's happening, it would happen back in history, and it's happening now. So let's learn from history. Let's see what was happening back there in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and understand like that is what's happening present day, and we have to acknowledge it. And it can be scary, right? No one's saying that these aren't scary times, but we have to acknowledge it. So here, just so I can keep today moving, here are just some tips on how to create a culturally inclusive learning environment. And again, in the action pack, it'll go a little bit further. So examining US history with a critical lens and acknowledge the intersection of OT history in order to understand how the past has impacted our present so we can create a better future. Explicitly identify and state the systems of oppression that impact lives of underrepresented students, approach the classroom with honesty, humility, and self-reflection, update cultural curriculum and course content to reflect cultural needs, and critically reflect on pedagogy and classroom practices. And so there's more information in the pack, but this can also be applied to practice areas. So now with that, we're going to open it up to the community. So I'll kick it back over to you, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Tony. This was like very powerful. I just wanted to add that in lieu of just the history, Black Ally Health Therapists too was founded in 2018 with the same idea that there was not a lot of groups that supported PT, OT, and speech therapists, particularly of Black descent. And when there is a lack, you fill in the gap. So, so we have a few questions. So the first question is, where are all the Black program directors?
Who can't have Black program directors if you don't have Black OTs? Yikes. That's honestly where are all the Black program directors? I am someone who works in academia currently, so I can only speak from my personal understanding, but academia in general, I am here to tell you all, is very cutthroat. It is very racist. It is very classist. It is very ableist. It's every type of ist and ism it is. And it's tough. It's a tough environment. It's a very unhealthy environment. And it is it can be a very harmful environment. So it's where, well, if there are no Black OTs, you can't have Black OT program directors. Two, a lot of Black OTs or Black people, but again, I can only speak for myself, do experience bullying, harassment, racism, questions of their competency or ability. So then it's like, who really wants to stay in that environment? And then three, again, speaking, from my experience, but also there's so much research to support this. Well, you have to look at the Black student experience as well, right? So many Black OT students are harassed and maligned and hurt and disrespected during their time in the program. So then it's like, why would I go back to the space that just hurt me? I would say is one of those. And then I think we've got Dr. Lott here with your hand up. Please take it away.
Well, I think that's an excellent question. And, where are all of the Black program directors? How about where are all the Black professors in the field of academia? Let's talk about the gatekeepers. I think definitely so much what Dr. Tony has said, you have to have opportunity. It is so cutthroat. I'm a clinician that straddles both fields. I do still practice on the clinical side, but I'm also in academia. And I cannot tell you that there is not a course that goes by where I'm not challenged by a decision that I made, all the way down to a grade that I gave a student. And it's very challenging. It's challenging to remain professional when you feel like you're being questioned, not on just your integrity, but on your education. And, when you look at the field that you're standing in and you say, I've achieved the highest educational degree that is available for this field, I I do have a doctoral degree in occupational therapy, but if you need me to provide my clinical experience or what the evidence says or what my practice setting is, it just becomes a constant battle. And as Dr. Tony shared, who wants to do that every day? I think it is discouraging. I also think it's a lot of gatekeeping put in place to keep us out of that arena, because I think it is a very quote unquote privileged arena. But when I step back as a clinician and a professor, and I think, gosh, I remember when I was in an OT school, I asked myself, where's the representation of the professors that look like me? Who can understand me? If I have a question about maybe what a client or a patient is dealing with culturally, who can truly understand? So I think that's one of the things that motivates me and propels me forward. But to answer the question simply, where are the Black OTs, the professions? I think there's a lot of gatekeeping going on there.
Absolutely. Thank you for your contribution. Let's see, in the comments, Jenny said, some of the Black OT programs who were leaders in OT and OT education during my years back in the late 1970s in the Commission on Education and now part of the Academic Leaders Council include Marilyn Ross, Limberly Edwards, Shirley Wells, and Cindy Hughes Harris, to name a few. So, okay. Do we have?
Yes, we have a few more questions.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Where are all the Black faculty members? I think we just kind of addressed that, but
yeah. Well, could I actually take a pause and only if people are comfortable, but if there are any current Black OT, either students or practitioners or other Black OTs here in academia, if anyone wants to drop in the chat or raise their hand, again, no pressure to, but we'd love to also hear from you about, if you're in academia, some of your experiences or some hesitations you might have about entering into academia, just so we can go to the next question, but if people want to put something in the chat and add, we'll definitely be able to loop back around.
Most definitely. The other question is, how do we, Black OTPs, continue to manage the OT space while being marginalized?
Can you, do that one more time?
Okay, no worries. How do we, as like Black OT professionals or practitioners, continue to manage the OT spaces while being marginalized?
I think that is a great question. I personally, I really love what OT is about. Yeah, I love about looking at the person and the environment and the context and the occupation and looking at a person holistically and incorporating the things that they love to do into the rehabilitation. Like, I'm all for it. But I also understand that the OT profession for itself is not the most inviting space, especially for Black practitioners. And honestly, at least my own strategy or coping skill is that I find the people within the spaces that I am who do appreciate me or do want to, support me on my journey as an OT. And those people aren't necessarily always going to be other OTs. So I think the first thing for OTPs is just always like safety first. And I mean like emotional and psychological safety. So finding that community of people who support you, whether they're OTs or not. I think another thing for OTPs, Black OTPs, is that increasingly there are more and different groups that are popping up that do explicitly want to support Black allied health professionals or Black OTs or OTs of color or just different spaces. And so I think that is a great way to go find people who will see you and hear you and want to interact with you and who want the best for you. Also, if you're a Black OT, y'all can also email me on the side. I have like a little Black OT chat to be honest. So yeah, like I promise you, there are little pockets and little groups everywhere. They're just kind of hard to find, but that is where I go. Like, go where you're celebrated and honored and respected and challenged in a healthy way. I would say is one of those things, because you have to recognize there are people out there who aren't interested in changing. Organizations, especially systems, are the whole thing about systems is that they're kind of set up so they're slow to change. So I would say I don't want you to burn yourself out trying to survive any harm that you're experiencing as a marginalized person in this profession. Definitely, I would say find your community and work on giving your energy to the things that you think will change society or change the profession or change your workspace, because we can't save an organization that doesn't want to change.
I definitely can agree with finding spaces that will support you, that would encourage you, that will celebrate you, especially in, like you mentioned, Dr. Tony, about making sure that you're in a space where that you're feeling safe. I feel like Black Allied Health also does a very great job in celebrating clinicians and celebrating therapists, making sure that that everyone is in the know of not just what we are doing for as events, but making sure that we are celebrating and promoting other organizations, events, and such as why we're here today. We're here today because we find value in each other's platform and how we can be a best support for not only OT practitioners and students, but the gamut, whether in our case, PTs and speech therapists as well. So I'm just going to encourage you and to just piggyback off of what Dr. Tony just mentioned, to definitely find spaces where you will be celebrated and to not worry about the naysayers. Don't worry about people pleasing per se. Focus on what you bring uniquely to the table. Understand like your identity, your occupational identity, and just understand that, everybody, may not like you, and that's okay. We're here to celebrate, we're here to encourage, and we're here to provide support. And like you mentioned, Dr. Tony, a safe space for you if you run into any type of dilemmas. So, Dr. Lott, would you like to add anything?
I think very well said, Ashley. Yeah, very well said.
Okay, we have one more question. Let me see if we have anything else in the chat. But one more question is, why isn't Black hair care education provided in the clinical settings for OT practitioners and taught in the academia courses provided for OT students?
I think that is an excellent question. Well, there are a lot of reasons. One, if you do not have Black professors, I don't know who's going to teach you about Black hair, really, to be honest. Two, a lot of our curriculum isn't really uniform, right? So yes, we have general ACODE standards, but those standards kind of guide what have to be included. So there's really no standard for it. Like, there's no understanding. Something that I will say on a practice level, I know that at least when I was at Ohio State working there, we did have a few Black nurses go and talk to, to management, and management was able to work something out with the supply chain. So we started getting Black hair care products. So if you're someone who is in a practice area, I think that would be a fair and good conversation to bring up if you're somewhere that has the resources and the staff that will listen to you, because that was really cool. They got like Cantu, and I was like, oh, this is like bougie. You know what I'm saying? I was like, oh, y'all got the nice stuff. So that is a suggestion that I do have there. But within education, yeah, that's gonna, yeah, you're not gonna see that without really having a Black professor who wants to talk about that. But I do think it's very important. And then I also feel like there is in a podcast from OT Jedi, someone did that specifically talked about Black hair care. I will look into that, and then I will add it to the action pack. Something else that I want to mention about the Google Doc that you all have. The reason that I made it a Google Doc is that as I find more information, or as Ashley finds more information, or something that we think will be helpful, we will update the folder. So please feel free to, please check back every 30 days or so, just to see what something new that was added. I see we have some hands up. So I think Michael.
Hi, Dr. Tony.
Hey.
So I was a little pensive here thinking about the whole question, a couple questions back, as far as where are the Black OTs of color in academia, and then I thought to myself, well, if there's a small percentage of people of color to begin with entering the profession, and then there is a bit of like a secret club of circles of individuals that reach out to other potential clinicians. So as students become clinicians, and they become strong experts in their field, I think we have to be intentional when we are in academic circles to reach beyond our own little bubbles of people that we know, because often those bubbles, those circles will be the majority of people in our profession, and sort of perpetuates not including people of color, because you're only reaching out for guest speaking or for adjunct positions, and we exclude people of color because we're not intentional in reaching out to those individuals that we might not have in our circles. I hope that came out clear, but
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense. A lot of academia is based off of social circles, and it's really, a lot of it is who you know and not what you know. And since academia is already so overwhelmingly white, it's the good old boys and good old girls club. So if it's the connection of who you know, and that routinely excludes people of color, and like you said, or being offered adjunct positions, which is all of the same work, but you're paid like $3,500 to teach for a whole semester, and things that aren't really equitable. So thank you so much for that point.
And I think, I would just add, I think those in academia currently, regardless of your race, ethnicity, or whatever you identify as, I think we just have to be intentional and reach spread a larger net beyond sort of our circles. So we have to just be intentional.
Thank you, Michael, for mentioning that. As I'm not in academia, and sometimes I feel, or let me refrain from saying but I believe that some people feel like the professor is not touchable, not like we can't reach you all. And so I love that you recognize that that we would like to be connected in some way, and even know the trajectory and the pathways to how you arrive to being in academia. Some feel that they might have to have a certain amount of years and of experience, and they have to, do these particular things to get to the level of teaching. And I also feel that anyone that is not in academia but have a passion to teach, you don't have to be limited to just being in academia. You can go out there and create a course for yourself. You can promote yourself like through TikTok or social media. There's so many ways, YouTube, there's so many ways we can share information, and then we can still connect to those who are in academia, connect to those various universities to make partnerships and whatnot. So, but thank you so much for your comment.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have one last comment in here from Sheila that said guest speakers also don't get paid, or at most $50. OTPs of color are paid the least, and we don't get paid time off to offer lectures that take us 10 hours to put together, especially when we are asked to speak about our personal experiences that white faculty cannot. So we are expected to lose income to do their job and feel honored to be invited. I'm chuckling because it's true. I am laughing because that is the correct take of there's a lot of you should be honored. So when OTPs of color are invited into spaces to do some work, it's the pay is always an honor. Well, honor does not pay the light bills. Honor does not give me the 10 hours that I just put into the presentation pack. Yes, know your worth. And yes, exactly.
Okay.
Mariah, I see your hand up. And thank you, Sheila, for your comment, because yes.
I just did not feel like typing this out, but I would just add to Sheila's comment is that in the experience of my education, like it was often that one speaker event was like supposed to somehow encapsulate like everything about like culture. And it's like, this is 1 hour long lecture, and then it would like usually be dropped after that. And then like we would never talk about it again. So it's like, it's all the things that Sheila said, plus the fact that like, that's kind of it for the like cultural component of like a class, and it's just kind of not furthered after the speaker leaves. So it's like, okay, what did we really gain from that? It's kind of unfortunate. That's how it often goes.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we did it. We did our 1 hour lecture on culture. We've talked about 5 different racial groups, 10 different ethnicities, to power through it. Like, all right, good luck out there. And thank you to the guest speaker who we gave $50 to tell us all of this. Yeah, it doesn't work because it has to be something that is interwoven into what we're actually learning. Yeah, it's like checking eggs. It is like checking a box, because when you don't actually care about equity and justice and inclusion, then you just go down and say, that's kind of what I was talking about, knowing your history, because we've lost sight of the whole history of why we're even doing all of this, that it's all okay, well, we did the 1 hour lecture, we did ACOTE standard this, we did ACOTE, we did the standard, let's keep it going. Yeah, that is what it has turned into, because we've forgotten why we even need these ACOTE standards in the first place. And so now it's just turned into, all right, got it done, let's go. So for the sake of time, I'm going to, yeah.
Hold on 1 second. We have one more question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. The question is, do you encourage white OT practitioners to join the Facebook group, or would you prefer this group to be reserved for Black OT practitioners? I would be happy to join, but want to be respectful of what is preferably to the group. Okay, so most definitely, I guess this is more sort of a question I'm thinking for Black Allied Health. Anyone that is a champion of the Black experience, I call it, or just out of diversity and within the profession, is able to join Black Allied Health. You do not have to be Black to join. The idea is for us to create an environment for Black practitioners to have a safe space, to be encouraged, to be empowered, to have their questions answered, and to to support and celebrate the Black therapy experience. But you do not have to be Black or Black descent to join. We do have all various ethnicities and people from all over the world in this group. So please feel free to join.
That was a great plug. And then Diverse OT, I think we do have a Facebook group. I'm gonna be honest, y'all, we're really bad at keeping up with our Facebook. So please just follow us on Instagram. Everyone's welcome. And just another shameless plug for Diverse OT. If you are a student who wants to be supported academically and emotionally, and sometimes financially, and sometimes it's just because we don't have that much money, but we try our best, start a chapter. We're here for you. Okay, so we're going to move. Oh, hello, Dr. Bolden here. Thank you. So we're going to move forward. I think the rest of today's conversation is really important. So the first is our solidarity and solutions, moving OT education and practice forward. So this bit of it, I'm going to go a little bit faster than usual, but again, you have all this whole presentation in the Google Drive, and also for every slide that has like a different heading, there's going to be a corresponding folder in there that you can go and get more resources. And then, like I said, I really want to spend some time talking about tactics to delay justice. And again, that'll be an opportunity for you all to jump in and talk about some of these things. So where do I begin? As always, I like to say self-reflection and self-directed learning. Anytime you want to help to create change, agitate for change, be a champion of another group or something like that, we have to make sure that we understand ourselves, our position to systems, and understand what it is that we're really looking to contribute or get out of this. So like I said, we'll be using the POJF. And so the participatory occupational justice framework is intended as a blueprint for action. And it differs from different models and frameworks in some significant ways. The most important of it being that it's intentionally designed as a circle, showing that these changes don't happen in any sequential order, and that they are, that change just, happens. All right, so our first thing that comes from the POJF is to raise consciousness of occupational injustice. So that looks like intentionally seeking out learning opportunities about occupational and social justice, and then engaging in collective action to bring to light occupational injustices that are happening within our own team programs and professional bodies. So again, before we start attempting to talk about occupational justice, we have to take a good look at ourselves, ask some reflection questions, and understand our position within our systems. And even things like understanding that if you are a white, able-bodied, heterosexual person, for example, you're benefiting from systems of oppression and systems such as white supremacy, even just by existing, right? Those are the big things that scare us. Those are the big words like, are you calling me a white supremacist? And the answer is no. I'm saying that these systems exist, and just by you existing and being white, you are at an advantage. So we have to recognize these systems, understand it, and understand how that changes positions, like our positions to our systems really change our understanding of the world around us. We also have to, be able to acknowledge some of like the political nature of the not only the work that we do, but the education provide, and the political nature of the lives that we live, right? So regardless if you're Republican or Democrat or independent or third party or Green, it doesn't matter. Politics are impacting you. So either you're gonna bite back or you're just gonna get eaten. So some things that we can specifically do is, like I said, intentionally seek out learning opportunities about occupational and social justice. So do you watch media that reflects the lived experiences of people that are different from you? What cultural events are happening in your community that you can attend? What are opportunities for learning that are available at your local library? What cultural or learning events are happening on your campus? What courses do you take to satisfy CEU requirements, right? This right here are all things that you can do to be in solidarity with other oppressed groups. This is all things that you can do for your own self-learning. So it's not all about action, which don't get me wrong, there's going to be action, but it's also about making sure you yourself are informed and that you yourself are learning and growing and wanting to understand different people and different lived experiences. So if you really, really want to learn and change, you have to be, like Michael said earlier, you have to be intentional. So the next is, reading political text. Like I said, politics are all around us. Politics impacts everything. All of us as healthcare providers, for the most part, if you work with patients or clients that have Medicare or Medicaid, guess what? That's politics. That is politics. How Medicare and Medicaid are reimbursed, that's politics. Who qualifies for Medicare and Medicaid, that's all politics. So if you want to understand these systems, we do have to understand politics and the government and all of those things. Create goals for learning. So create intentional goals. And again, in the action pack, there is actually a goals template, an example of how to set the goals. Things that you can do, you can diversify your social media follows. So do you follow people who create content about lived experiences of disabled people, Black people, Hispanic people, POCs, Indigenous people, LGBTQ+, Muslim, etc. And then again, are there any YouTubers or TikTokers who are justice oriented that you could learn from? Like, these are all things that you could be doing right now, again, to be in solidarity. And from this self-education, this is where some of the solutions come from. Because once we all start to understand systems or understand the other people around us, then we can understand how and why we need to come together to really agitate for change. We also have to investigate your own positionality within the system. So ask yourself, what biases, prejudices, and assumptions do I bring into the classroom, clinic, or in life? Why is it important to be aware of social identities? How might my actions be perceived differently if I was a member of a dominant group versus a historically marginalized group? And then when I'm in a setting as a member of a dominant group, what specifically can I do to ensure that people from all identities are welcome? So again, this is solidarity. These are the solutions. Doing this self-work, looking yourself and saying, how can I be an advocate myself? Engage in reflexive practice. So be aware of your own social positioning, engage in reflexive practice as in asking questions, learning from one each other with your classmates and professors who are different from you, especially from underrepresented and stigmatized groups. And this goes the same for clinicians. Be able to provide your instructors with timely and honest feedback, or support a friend or classmate when providing feedback. And again, this goes for the clinical area as well. So if your manager out in the clinic or a coworker is saying something where it's like, probably not, giving them that feedback. Listen and validate the lived experiences of your classmates. And again, this should say classmates or coworkers. So if someone says, oh, I had this experience or this happened, just believing them and giving them that support. Again, exploring your own biases, and then be able to engage in respectful but challenging dialogue, right? There are going to be very difficult conversations that we have in order to promote change. Talking, like I said, even acknowledging historical truths ends up being a really difficult conversation. And this one I'm saying directly to white people on here, if you want to be an advocate, there are going to be tough conversations, and we can't start blaming or feeling attacked or crying, because those are just things that shut down conversation, and just say, hey, okay, in order to create change, we're going to have to challenge ourselves and engage in difficult dialogue. But it could, just because you're having a difficult conversation doesn't mean that there's not respect involved, right? Difficult conversations are different than mean conversations, and we cannot conflate those two. Sometimes it's just hard to hear the truth, but it's necessary. We also have seeking out opportunities to learn about different population groups. You can collaborate with your coworkers to create a culture of inclusion that is sustained and celebrated. You can understand that you're not an expert of all cultures. There will be times that you mess up, and that's okay. just apologize, like literally, please just apologize and then move forward, ready to learn from your mistake. You also have to be committed to justice, and sometimes that means leaning into discomfort, right? Justice is something that we have to work towards and struggle towards. And so that means the going is going to get tough. Like, again, look at the world around us present day. Like the going got tough, but we're going to have to be a little bit uncomfortable and do hard things to make the world right again. Then, like I said, also be willing to admit when you're wrong. Find a community of support. So something you can do is find people who also want to learn, grow, and change, people who are committed to helping one another along in the journey. And communities are built on care, mutual respect, honesty, and trust. So find your people, find your group. And then here, looking at the bigger picture, right? So those were all things you could do individually. Looking at the bigger picture, this breaks down getting political. So again, regardless of political beliefs, politics affect us all. So for one example, looking into the candidates that AOT PAC donates to, right? That's political. So as AOTA is putting out statements that, oh, we support our practitioners of color and our LGBTQ plus practitioners, and we're going to make Florida safe. I would love for you all to go into, and again, it's included in the action pack, they donate to Florida Republicans who are making the laws that are harming LGBTQ people and practitioners and students, that harm Latinx people, that harm Black people. So it's like, yeah, this is all political because you're talking a big game, you're putting out statements, but your politics are saying, actually, we don't really care. We're going to give them the money anyway. So it actually is not untrue to say AOTA is directly funding the fascism that we're seeing, right? Because that's where they've decided to put their money. So we have to get political and look at these things. Stay updated on legislation surrounding Medicare, Medicaid, and other healthcare policies. Like I said, that's politics. Stay informed on trans healthcare access and accessibility. That's politics, and that's also healthcare. We have not only trans OT practitioners and students, we have trans patients, and we have to understand what's going on with them to give them that culturally informed care. We have to look into the political nature of health disparities. There's a podcast I included in the action pack called The Political Determinants of Health. Highly recommend. Stay informed on abortion care access. Again, that is healthcare, and we're healthcare practitioners. Get involved in local politics. Local politics are so important. Just being the school board is important. The mayor is important. The state, there's all local politics are very, very important. So stay informed and get involved if you can. And then engage with historical and political texts about other cultures, communities, and ways of doing and being. Because right now, yeah, as in the US, are we in a bad spot? Absolutely. But there are other cultures and countries and people and even different groups within America that are doing things differently and in a healthy and successful way. So let's give room to other ways of knowing and being and saying, hey, we don't have to know everything. It's important to let your voice be heard. So if you see something unjust happening in your school or at the workplace or within our profession, we need to be filing ethics complaints. We need to be reaching out to board of directors. We need to be reaching out to state associations and managers, our universities, our workplace, and filing complaints, especially, again, if you're someone who's saying, I'm an advocate, I'm an ally, I want to help, I want to do this, well, then that is what this looks like. It means saying, hey, we've got to speak up when this stuff happens. Also, money talks. Money is a voice. So I know there have been some, like, for example, some calls of boycotting AOTA Inspire 2024. Like, yeah, exactly. Because if we just keep on giving them money and say, okay, well, but what you're doing, we don't like, there's no motivation for anyone to stop what they're doing if they still got what they wanted, which is our money. So as money talks. All right, these next ones. So demanding accountability again from AOTA, our OT programs, and our workplace. What this looks like is like asking things like, what are timelines for change? Who's in charge in this process? How are the changes in the program being assessed? So those are some follow-up questions. and again, I'm going fast, but this is all in the pack because I really want to get to this last part. Strategize resource funding. So a lot of this is mutual aid. So what mutual aid can look like is things like sharing textbooks, giving each other access to journals, making things like sharing practice resources together. Even as students, maybe making your meals together to support one another. It can look like, mutual aid can look like so much. It can look like providing scholarships for our students, creating mutual aid funds, things like that. So that is what mutual aid could look like in education. And again, that kind of gives us some of that power back, saying, you know what, we don't need to rely on these systems that are harming us to get the information and knowledge that we need. We can rely on one another, because at the end of the day, that's what mutual aid is about. It's about taking care of one another and making sure everyone's needs are met. And that is something that we could be doing. Like I said, raising consciousness of occupational injustice. So I know there was the USC Chan Justice Collective who had the Justice for Arame movement, like things like that. That's really, really, really important, right? It is important that we are speaking truth to power, and it is really scary. But when you start speaking up, you've seen from a lot of things that have happened, a lot of other OTs and a lot of people have been able to come forward and let their voices be heard. So we have to bring to light the injustices that are happening. Otherwise, they'll just continue to happen, right? Because abuse of power thrives on silence. That is its main, like, breakfast, lunch, and dinner is like, ha ha ha, if everyone's silent, I can just keep on harming. So it's really important that we bring things to light and provide each other with education. It's also important to engage collaboratively with partners. So with this in university settings, this looks like power sharing. It looks like engaging with your students to talk about and do an actual needs assessment. What are their occupational needs? What are the injustices your students are facing? How are you collecting this information on a regular basis and then also responding to it? In the practice area, it's working with your clients, asking and talking more about the issues that they are facing and learn more about the systemic issues that they're facing. And again, it requires power sharing, collaboration, and self-reflection. And then here we look at inspire advocacy for sustainable or closure. So this looks at, again, looking at we want to create systems that are made to thrive. Like we said, we understand the foundations of OT and what they're built on. And so if the foundation is rotten, then we have to rebuild it. And there's no easy fix. I think a lot of times people want the answer that, oh, we just have to do this, this, and this, and everything will be okay. And it's like, no, we got to roll up our sleeves and we got to get to work, and we got to get this whole rotten foundation, and we got to pour a whole new foundation, but it will be worth the effort. It is worth the effort, what we're doing, because I know so many of you who are on the call now have been doing the work. And I just want you to also affirm you all in that work, because sustainable change takes time, effort, community, and a willingness to change. So we got this. And last, it's really important to ask the tough questions. So again, I'm going to just breeze through this because this is all in there, but asking, what does your curriculum look like? What does your admissions or hiring process look like? How do you recruit underrepresented students? How do you retain underrepresented students and OTPs? So asking those questions. And then here you'll also see some actions that OT and OTA programs can take to try to include equity and justice and change within their programs. And again, these are questions and reflection questions for y'all relating to a pedagogical practice, program evaluation and assessment. Can you confidently describe the culture of your program? Questions like that. And, are you evaluating the physical and social and political space? Are you able to identify the systemic facilitators and barriers to creating culturally inclusive learning environments? Do you collaborate with students and establish a shared vision of what you want the program to look like? And are you advocating for the rights of underrepresented people at your program level, the university level, and in day-to-day life, right? So I know that was really fast, sorry y'all. But in this last official 20 minutes, we'll go through these tactics to delay justice, because I thought this was really important, because like I said, I know a lot of you here are already doing this work, and it can be frustrating sometimes to be like, why aren't things moving forward? So I thought I'd also just acknowledge that there are tacitly things that are designed to delay justice and delay change. And in here, I will have people, I would love for, I'm going to pose some questions, and if people can respond in the chat, I won't have time to read all of them, but I just kind of want everyone else to be able to see some of these tactics and what they look like in real life. So the first is deflection. So it is defined as causing something to change direction by interposing something, turn aside from a straight course, or cause someone to deviate from an intended purpose. So deflection within, again, this is going to look in OT programs and also clinical practice. It looks like deflect the conversation to a drawn out discussion, right? So you might come up and say, hey, like today, our professor had said something about, that was really offensive about Black people during this lecture. And it's, oh, well, so-and-so probably didn't mean that. Well, let's schedule a meeting to all sit down, and then let's call in this person, and let's do this, and then it turns into a big long out process where really the response needs to be, oh, that was really unacceptable. Let's call this teacher in and go through our whatever, process we have in place for getting to the bottom of it and then moving from there. Or it can also look like pass the buck. So passing the buck to a group with little or no authority. That's also what deflection looks like. So a group of students or even a group of practitioners could go up to their manager or their program director and be like, hey, we really feel like X, Y, and Z needs to change. And they'll be like, yeah, we need to do that. That's what a lot of DEI and JEDI committees, I need you to know that a lot of them are deflection. It's because when you come up there and say, hey, X, Y, Z happened. Well, we'll give it to the JEDI committee. We'll give it to the DEI committee. And that committee is typically filled with either the sole faculty of color who's not receiving any resources or being supported in the efforts, or left to the person with the least amount of power in the program, or it's just for show. That's what a lot of times, that's what deflection can look like. So in the chat, I want to put, if anyone has ever seen, this tactic before, what did it look like in your experience? If you ever brought up a problem forward and someone said, we have JEDI, or we can, like the deflection of not actually answering the question or responding effectively to the problem. So just know that is a tactic. Deflection can also look like that white fragility. It can look at, someone can come up and say, oh, well, today, this manager said this about Asian people. I thought it was inappropriate. Da, da, da. Well, are you calling me a racist? Are you attacking me? What are you trying to say? Well, da, da, da. And that is also deflection, right? Because now you're on the defensive saying, no, I just brought something. That's a tactic. No, if someone said something messed up and you bring it up, like there's no version of this where you're the villain. That's just deflection. And another one of these is, I forgot to type it into the actual presentation, but another deflection can look like I call it weaponized incompetence. What? We have a problem? I don't know how to fix that, or I don't know how to, what are the first steps? How do you want us to do this? Things like that. Especially within university programs, it's kind of like, you want to tell me you, a university professor with either your PhD or OTD or master's, who has all this education, who does all this research, who's at this university, you don't know how to look up different cultural groups. You don't know how to find resources on your campus to bring in to help students. That's just like, it's just not true. That is a deflection tactic. Is just like when programs act like they don't know how to do better, because the thing is, your professors, even if they don't themselves have the keys, or your managers or whoever, it's, they have access to the resources to do better. And they also obviously have the capacity to learn things and research things and do and teach. So it should be no different. And Crystal said deflection can look like focusing on another marginalized population when brought up. Ooh, yes, Crystal. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for saying that. Exactly. Well, you guys, you have it better than that group, or well, if we do this for you, then we'll have to do this for everyone. Things like that. Yes, thank you, Crystal. The next are delays. So what delays can look like are, we're working on the problem. When in reality, nothing's being done, or it can look like we need more information about the problem and we formed a committee to gather it, or again, this learned helplessness. So specifically, when we talk about JEDI or DI, justice, equity, access, inclusion, you understand how much information there is in this world on these topics. There is so much information already. So if something happens in your program or at your workplace that has to do with, let's say we want to talk more about making our classroom more accessible to people with physical disabilities. Oh, well, we have to collect the information, and we have to do a committee, and we have to, there's so much information out there already. There's so much. And so this is another delay tactic, and it's created to hurt the momentum of a strong group, like a group of people or an organization or community members, to kind of lose heart and give up, because then this gathering of the data and information goes on for months and months and months in a hope that you kind of give up. Some of these delays are also that learned helplessness, because again, it has to do with kind of that weaponized incompetence again. So it's like, we can figure out how to learn about different cultures, different people, different ways of being a little bit faster than what we're seeing. And then give me 1 second here. So I wanted to give an example of what I'm talking about. So I think you all can see my screen. This is AOTA's Be Heard, We're Listening sessions, reflections, recommendations, and actions. This is from 2021. And if you go into here, AOTA talks about they, decided to, on some random page, update their history, saying like, oh, actually our history isn't absolutely completely correct. But then they just go on to, oh, we're addressing DEI and occupational therapy, and this is what we're going to do in the short term and the long term. And these are all the same issues 2 years later that we're talking about. So it's like you formed these committees, you collected all of this information about listening and learning, all of that. But they had also done the same thing in after George Floyd was murdered and all of that. So it's those things where it's like, if AOTA is ever like, well, we've got to create this committee to listen and learn, well, we have it on record that you all have done 10 gazillion different committees. So how many committees and how many listening sessions do you need to address the problem? Because what they're talking about in this article from 2021 from this listening session were all the same issues that came about at AOTA Inspire 2023 this year. So again, 2 years later. That's what we mean by this is just a tactic to not actually change anything. Is, oh, we'll have a committee, we'll gather all the OTs of color to give us a talk back session. Okay, well, you've done a talk back session every single time something occurs. This is a tactic. Denials. We don't have a problem with X in this program. Has anyone ever heard that one within their program or their workplace, or just denies effectiveness of any solutions that you propose? So I think the second one is something that is really important. So for example, I know one time when I was in, getting my education, we were like, oh, our materials that we're learning aren't that culturally sensitive. And it turned into, so it's like, oh, it's not that culturally sensitive, can we would like to see updated curriculum. So then we were told, well, hey, we can't force instructors to change their learning materials. And we said, okay, well, fine, we hear you on that. So what if we did a needs assessment and then we bought books that could supplement our education? Well, that isn't how big change happens. Buying textbooks isn't what's gonna get this done. So it's anytime you throw out an effective solution, something that could address part of the problem. Oh, well, no, that's not going to help. No, that's not going to help. No, that's not going to help. No, that's going to help. And something that I would like to, also for all of these in the chat as well, as I'm going through, if you have any ideas on ways to work around these tactics, please drop those suggestions. Because I know something, again, with the denials, a strategy that I use a lot is, okay, so what can we do? Because that's another thing with denial and delay. People will talk to you all day about what you can't do. Well, we don't have the money for this. Well, we don't have this for this. So we can't do this. We can't do that. We can't do this. We can't do that. And again, it's to make you feel like you have to give up. It's just a tactic. So when people start going to the we can't, just stop the conversation and say, okay, I understand that there are restrictions on the things that you're able to do. Can we talk about what is possible? What are the suggestions and strategies you have? What can be changed in this moment? And then you're going to find out people really don't want to change. But so those are, again, are all tactics, and we can't fall into them. So you'll stop the conversation, say, okay, then tell me what is possible. And that also, going back to delays here, something that really helps to get around this tactic of delays is requesting a timeline for change. Well, who's responsible for the change that is going to happen? What does this timeline look like? How can we check in? What are the milestones that we'll be looking for so we know that what we've discussed is making progress? That's a way to get around delays. And then with deflection, asking, especially with DEI and JEDI committees, what is this committee about? Who is the highest ranking member of this committee, especially if you're in academia, which I'm not here to say that I agree with hierarchies, because I don't, but that's just how academia works. It's like, so who is in charge? So if your program director or program chair isn't part of your DEI or JEDI committee, I'm here to tell you, like, sorry, they're not really working that hard to change it, because if they wanted to change, then the person with the most amount of power in the program would be on that committee making sure these things happen. Again, they usually give it to professors of color or junior faculty, and junior faculty is already going through so much, but then also kind of have to do it because not only are they junior faculty, but it also directly implicates them. But anyway, with JEDI committees, what are the goals of this committee? How is change going to be made? What have you already done to promote systemic change? That's a big question. Asking, can you show me the tangibles of what you have actually provided? Because a lot of times, again, when you start digging, you find out that what they've provided is that they submitted a poster somewhere or sat on the higher DEI committee and got an award for themselves, but didn't actually make change in the program, things like that. Those are ways to get around deflection. So we have discounting. So, and we saw this in real time again with AOTA Inspire, which is questioning the legitimacy of an organization or its efforts. So a lot of the students who were there with the Justice for Arame movement, we saw a little bit online. I don't know about y'all, about, well, I wish they hadn't done, airing these grievances online. I think one of the professors at USC actually commented on their Instagram, calling them, whiny, complainy brats. And you can check their Instagram, like we got the receipts on that one. I'm not just making that up. And so it's to say, well, look at these millennials, these Gen Z always complaining about something, or I didn't like how they did it. They should have written a formal complaint and submitted it to their program instead of being online. And who acts like this? And again, well, that shouldn't matter, right? Because however you choose to raise your voice about an injustice, right? You're not the issue. Your organization isn't the issue. The group of faculty or the group of friends or colleagues or students who came together to create this change, that is, again, that's a tactic of saying, well, had you done it this way, we would have listened. But since you did it that way, we're not going to listen. That isn't, if you had done it the other way, they also probably weren't planning on listening. So that is another tactic. Or, this group is just a bunch of X complaining because they didn't get Y. So trying to minimize what it is that you are trying to get accomplished. Deception. So these are things tactics that can look like confusing you about bureaucratic nonsense or red tape. So that can look like, well, in order for this to happen, we'll have to talk to the program chair, who has to talk to the director, who has to talk to the vice dean, who has to talk to the dean, who has to consult with the board of trustees, who has to do this, who has to do that. And then you have to fill out this form, you have to fill out that form, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. And then you have to go to this office, and you have to go up there, and you have to go to all these things to say, what are you going to say? If someone told you have 6 gazillion steps to make change, you're probably at some point going to be like, well, dang it, it's not worth it, right? So those are ways where it's like, oh, that is because you don't actually want me to get this change done. Things like misrepresenting statistics. Well, I don't understand why you're complaining. We technically, if you include this, that, and there, we do actually have 10% of like diverse students, but like their diversity is like, well, this person had blonde hair and this person had brunette hair, right? Where it's like, I'm not quite. Or making suggestions that really don't have anything to do with what you're trying to accomplish. So I know, again, this is something that happens not only in university spaces, but definitely in workspaces as well, where someone says, well, we're noticing a problem with XYZ. This thing is happening and we'd like to change this, or we would like to speak out about this injustice. And either your program or management comes back and says, well, here's a pizza party. Let's dance it out. Let's have a spirit week. Things like that, where it's like, okay, but what does that have to do with the injustice that I just brought up that I'm asking you to address? So again, that's a tactic. Dividing. It looks like dividing groups over controversial issues. And I think earlier, who said it, when they kind of compare 2 groups to each other, that's a big one. That's a big tactic of, well, if we give you this, or well, this group, we gave them the $500 and that's all we had to give out to a group. So like, if you guys want the money, you're going to have to talk about it amongst yourselves. So making resources scarce and making it a group on group issue as to why the other group didn't get money, instead of, having systems in place where everyone's supported, or things like that. So just trying to divide and conquer, attempt to reduce overall effectiveness of the group, or like try to buy off members of with offers of incentives. So, if you kind of drop this issue, like maybe you'll get this promotion, or, okay, well, this, Ashley over here didn't participate in those protests. So like, she's going to be the TA now, things like that. That's what dividing can look like, where it's putting groups of people who are trying to get their needs met against each other, instead of these groups focusing on the fact that it's the system kind of impacting them. Dulcifying or appeasing. So things, again, if someone, says, hey, XYZ happened that was offensive towards Asian people or Chinese people or well, okay, we're going to do a Lunar New Year celebration, and like, yay, aren't we, look at us celebrating, Asian culture. And it's like, wait a minute. that didn't solve the problem. Or like I said, we promise the bathrooms are going to be safe in Florida. We promise, just show up. Well, we swear nothing will happen. Or yeah, we'll be giving $500 to the student group. So haven't we, look at us supporting you guys. Haven't we done it? And that can also be an issue. All right, so 2 more here. We've got discrediting, which, you know, attempt to make your group look unreasonable, and motive and ways of accomplishing your goals are both called into question. So again, not like, why are you posting this on Instagram? Like, we should sit down and have a conversation, or calls for civility in the face of oppression. And again, that was the reason why our history is also important, where it's like, you've got, you know, practitioners and students so fed up, and it's like, why are you so mad? What's so bad anyway? And it's like, well, if you step back and take a look at the whole thing, it's like a lot is bad. And things like that, or things like, yes, we did say X people, like this population of people are poor, but you shouldn't have called me classist in front of everyone. Things like, again, trying to discredit how you've brought attention to what's going on. Because a lot of white supremacy and a lot of resistance to change really relies on making oppressed groups look unreasonable, right? That's the whole thing functions off of making your requests for humanity, humility, and inclusion look very unreasonable. Like, so you want us to get ramps and make this and spend all this money to make this whole classroom accessible because you're the only person here who has a disability? And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, because a single person, deserve to be included. And that is what I'm saying. It's not an unreasonable request. Things like that. And then destroying. And again, this is a bit more extreme. It depends. I'm not saying this is true all places. This is something, though, that I have seen up close and have also kind of experienced, which is just full out going against, if you have an organization or a collective that is trying to make change, trying to ruin your organization in any way possible. So that can look like, well, that's against the rules, or maybe private one-on-one conversations of like, do you still want to be in this program? Or do you still think you're a good fit for this company? Well, anyone who's part of X organization is excluded from getting Y benefits. And here it's just really important to know your rights. It's really important to know your rights as a worker. It's important to know your rights as a student. It's important to know your rights as a citizen, because that's really what's going to protect you. And then the last thing here, a deal. This is not a tactic, but a deal is hopefully when you have reached an active compromise and to get the change that you want. But it's important to know with a deal that you keep your principles at the forefront and make sure that you're really getting what it is that you want, and that you're getting something that is that actually addresses the changes that you want to make. And so that's that. And so I just want to end with a quote from John Lewis, which is, when you see something that's not right, you must say something, you must do something. Democracy is not a state, it is an act, and each generation must do its part to help build what we have called the beloved community, a nation and a world society at peace with itself. It just really speaks to me. I love a lot of the comments in here. Thank you so much. And since we're at our official time for ending, here's just more info on Diverse OT. I'll stay back after, but I want to let people go who have to go. Ashley, if you have anything.
I just want to thank everyone for those who stayed on. I learned so much. I want to just, if we can all just clap it up for Miss Dr. Tony for coming with knowledge and action steps. I'm so thankful for this opportunity, and just want you guys to know that our links are in the chat for taking action. Also, if you are interested in being a mentor as one of like your action steps, we also provide levels of mentorship. And if you're, I think we mentioned in academia, if you're in academia and want to provide mentorship in that area, please fill out our form. It'll be in the Google document that is being shared, as well as our information as well. I'm just so elated, and I think that you're doing God's work, Dr. Tony. I thank you so very much, and thank you for everyone who interacted, whether you interacted through the link that was sent or on the chat or unmuted yourself. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Lott, for pouring in your wisdom to us as well. So back to you, Dr. Tony. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, if y'all have any follow-up questions, you can reach me at info@diverseot.com. I'm also very active on Instagram, or you can email me. It's been so great working with you, Ashley. Thank you everyone for, again, who participated in the chat, gave solutions, suggestions. It's been really cool to see everyone just talking in here and being able to connect these groups. And I feel really blessed to be able to do the work that I do and to meet the people that I've met. So yeah, thank you everyone for being here.
One more comment. Black Ally Therapists, we're tentatively having a summit at the end of the year. And Dr. Tony, I would love for you to participate in that summit because
absolutely. Send me the details. I'm down.
that's